So in my work, I think I'm always inviting people to think about the effect we have on one another. And all of our codes of ethics and most of our mission statements contain sentences like, we respect the inherent worth and dignity of everyone entrusted to our care. And that's true independent of your race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, nature of illness, religious beliefs. And yet, if we're true, if we're honest, none of us do that perfectly. And there's always certain individuals that will walk the extra mile for or do a little bit more. And there are people that we think don't merit our attention or our time. And I think one of the challenges of an ethics educator is to always shine a light on those human interactions. And I always say to healthcare professionals, literally who we choose to be each day we show up for work has the ability to determine how people are born, live, and die. And there's almost no time that somebody puts me in front of an audience that I don't share a particular story. And it's the story of a sister in my community who at the age of 39 was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer and then suffered two of the hardest years of dying that I've ever witnessed. She looked like a Holocaust victim when she died. She had intestinal obstruction. She was in and out of the hospital for surgery. I can remember as a young nurse spending hours physically sitting behind her to give her strength as she retched over an emesis basin. And she said to me, because I was teaching at our college at the time, Carol, please tell your students, when I first got sick, it didn't matter how people treated me because I knew who I was. She was president of our college. She had a PhD in microbiology. She was from Worcester, Mass, and had that delightful sense of reserve and privacy that we associate with certain New Englanders. And we, of course, tramped all over that as she became more ill. She was one of the most gentle, loving human beings I've ever had the blessing to know. But she said, as I've grown weaker, I become whomever people make me. And she said, if a doctor or nurse walks into my room and treats me like meat, I become meat. And I wanted to cry that I, or a member of my profession, could take a Lillian and transform her to a slab of meat by virtue of what I did or didn't do, how I looked, what I said, how I touched. And so when I talk about dignity, do we respect every human being that we encounter? Do we respect life in all of its forms? The kicking, biting screamer, the person who has a poor history of self-care behaviors, the person who abuses the system, the family who's never grateful, my colleague who is arrogant, who doesn't have a good bedside manner. Am I able in each human encounter to say, here's another human being to whom I owe respect, simply because they're another human being? We have the two types of human dignity, the attributed, where society decides what makes us worthy. It's how productive we are, how much money we make, how many degrees we have. And then we have that inherent dignity that we all possess simply by virtue of being human. And that's what I'm talking about. You see a lot of instances, and I'll just tell one more story, but a friend who was a graduate student said he had been to a party the previous evening where he encountered some of our medical students. And he said, they talked about taking care of a SPOS that day. And he said, I asked, what's a SPOS? Well, the acronym SPOS stood for subhuman piece of shit. And that was the term they used to describe these demented nursing home residents who came in all contracted, not able to speak for themselves, no family at their side. And as the horror of that name struck me, what do you owe? Shit. Do you have to worry about keeping it warm? do you have to worry about comfort? And what immediately came to my mind was an essay that one of our senior nursing students wrote when I asked them to think about instances where they saw substandard care. And they talked about being in the emergency room and hearing this animal scream come from behind a curtain. And the nurse said, when I stuck my head in to see what was happening, there was one of these nursing home residents brought into the emergency room because of an ulcer. And she said the resident and medical student had this older person's leg straight up in the air, and they were poking at the ulcer. And the resident was screaming, howling. But you can see the connection between subhuman piece of shit and human behavior. What do I owe that person? Concern about their comfort, let alone their humanity? Nothing. So when I talk about respecting people, I think that's the challenge for all of us. We're human. We sometimes experience revulsion, disgust, anger, frustration. But as a professional, one of the essential elements of my model of professional care is that affectivity, the ability to be moved by the plight of another human being, and then to respond professionally, which is respectfully.